Ernie, do you want to build your cousin a computer?
Hello and welcome to Do Buy Build Go, and today we're going to build an ultra budget gaming PC. Now, in order to do this, to meet our price point that we're trying to stay under $200, we're going to have to buy some used components and find some deals out there that may or may not always be available, but I think you'll be able to use this video as a guide to help you find your way into the world of PC gaming pretty easily. My goal is to find one as cheap as possible, but still have good performance in games such as Fortnite and CSGO. So let's go take a look and see what we can find that's out there.
Okay, so locally we're going to start our search on a local site that's kind of like Craigslist and really has supplanted Craigslist where I live, that a lot of people will post used components, and these are, on my first search, these are some various computers that I'm looking at that have come up. I do want to point out that, they're all very reasonably priced within the $100 range. I do want to caution everybody that when you're looking for something like this, and again, we can look on eBay and you'll see similar prices, maybe a little bit more because you'd have to pay for shipping usually. Be leery of the small form factor. When you go to this route, those are usually going to be a little bit cheaper, but you're going to have a harder time getting a good graphics card in there. So in order to get a graphics card in a small form factor, you either have to get a small form factor graphics card, which basically limits you to 1650. The way that you get around that is with a PCIe extension cable, something like this. It's about $20, and then in addition to that, you then are still limited to a really low power card, so you'd be better off spending the extra on just getting a tower like this one right here. So this is a third generation Core i5. This is 4 cores, 4 threads. This computer comes complete with 8 gigs of RAM. It has a ½ terabyte hard drive. It's already got Windows. That's an activated version. It's got a CD-ROM. This is a good foundational system, and I like that this guy has even posted some pictures of the inside, and I can see right here that we're using, it looks like just a single stick of RAM. Maybe that one right there might be also populated, so we could be using 2 4 gig sticks of RAM, so there's still some expansion here. It has a PCI Express 3.0 slot for a graphics card. I can't tell if this has on the power supply any external power connectors for a video card, but we're starting here. So this is our foundation, and we're going to then do some upgrades to this to, get us into a gaming rig. So for $100, this is a great deal. I'm going to call this guy and see if this is still available and if I can pick this up. If you're looking on eBay, I found the exact same computer, $139 shipped. Fantastic deal. I think this is the good route to go. Has some decent expansion, and there we go. Now I want to put a graphics card in this, and I really have a couple routes here because I'm trying to stay under this budget because I'm giving this to my nephew. I don't want to put a super powerful graphics card, and really he likes to play Fortnite and Minecraft with my son, so I don't need something super powerful. And if I look locally again, I can look for, different graphics cards, and these are the ones that are near me. And if I look at like this GT 710, that's not a great graphics card, but it might do the job. I don't think I'd pay that, but for like this R9 270, now that's a good deal for $50, and if I could even offer them 40 and they were willing to take that. Same thing with this R9 380. Both those for $40 would be absolutely excellent value. So I think I'll call both those and see if we can't come away with some of those. If not, we'll look on eBay at some other higher end options. Like that R9 270, for example, on eBay is going for about $40. So you could pick up something like this relatively inexpensively, and this would be a good low to medium resolution 1080p gaming of Fortnite, and perfect for Minecraft. So, and it would give you expandability options, because as we saw inside this looks like a regular power supply connector, and this is a normal size power supply. So we'd be able to upgrade this power supply in the future to support a higher end graphics card. or using these adapters, we should be able to even support, say, a 1060 or a 1070. And we'll actually test that later and see how these perform between these. Assuming I can pick up one of these graphics cards, we'll start there. Even something like a GTX 960, definitely a step up. I'm also looking at if I go for something that maybe if I'm willing to spend a little more, but for my budget I'm not today, you know, something like an RX 570, something like that would be a decent option for about $110. Or if I want to spend just a little bit more, I get a good bump in performance, an RX 580. You know, I'm going to spend $120, although I'd probably want an 8 gig version at that point if I'm spending this kind of money, so about $155. So, I mean, obviously I can spend a lot of money here and get a significantly better graphics card, but that's not my goal. So again, let's see if I can't get a hold of some of these sellers and see what we can get. And same thing with the tower, see if I can't snag one of these, and then we'll come back with the results.
Okay, so it's been a pretty successful morning. I was able to get a hold of a couple different sellers, and some were available, some weren't, and some were willing to negotiate a little bit on the price. And the seller of the Optiplext came down a little bit, so we were able to get a little bit cheaper, and I was able to pick up one of the R9s. I was also able to pick it up cheaper. I got about $20 off this and about $10 off this. So right now we're sitting at about $120 for this PC. So let's take a look at what we got. So first let's look at the tower. So you can see this is obviously used, has scratches and battle wounds on it. I have not opened this up. Let's take a look inside and see how it looks here. Looks like it's been cleaned, which is good. No dust in here. Looks like a stock cooler, and if the listing said 8 gig of RAM, so that would be 2 4 gig sticks. We'll have to check that out and verify that. Got an 80 plus gold power supply. Does not look like it has a graphics card output, so, but in general looks pretty good. Okay, so on to the graphics card. I thought this was a pretty good deal for what I paid for it. It's an R9 290. This isn't gonna get insane frame rates, but as you can see, it's just filthy. Got some air cleaner. We're gonna clean this off and we'll install it in here, get an adapter in place so we can run this, and then we'll start on some benchmarks. Up we have Cinebench R20, in which this Core i5 3550 scores 1042 points, which is basically what the benchmark already told us, just a little bit slower. Nothing exciting here. And on PC Mark 10, between the different graphics cards, we got similar results within the margin of error. Obviously a little bit of improvement, but nothing to get excited about. Same thing on Geekbench, similar scores across the board. So this is where we really start seeing some improvements, and this is Furmark. With the R9 270, we saw 35 frames per second at 1080p, but when we upgraded to the 1060, we got 74 frames per second and a much smoother experience, and that continued with the RTX 2070, in which we got 143 frames per second, and it looked good at this point. Up next, we have 3D Mark and the Time Spy benchmark. This was painful to watch on the R9 370, and it only scored a 1695, whereas when we upgraded to the 2060, everything smoothed out and it actually performed quite well with manageable frame rates. But we really saw the biggest performance with the 2070. That's not unexpected, as it is a considerably more expensive graphics card, and this benchmark shows it. Now for the Heaven benchmark. This is where things get really interesting. The R9 2070 recorded 52.2 frames per second at 1080p and actually looked pretty good during most of the run. But the 1060 scored 120 frames per second and it looked buttery smooth throughout. There weren't any stutters or any issues. And the same thing can be said with the 2070. It scored over 200 frames per second and it performed very well.
I like the Heaven benchmark because not only is it a good stress test for a graphics card and a system, it also gives a good indicator of what kind of performance you can expect from a certain GPU in your system.
Now on to Fortnite, the game we bought this computer for. Initially we tried high settings on our 270 and only got 41 frames per second. Now, while that was fine when we were by ourselves, as soon as we got into any sort of battles or there were other players around or a lot of movement, it really started to stutter and wasn't very enjoyable to play. So we dialed the settings down to medium, and all of a sudden it made a world of difference. While it didn't look as good, we were able to get 90 frames a second with the R9 270, which was really good, and it was very playable. And while again, like it didn't look as good, it wasn't terrible either. It did stutter and twitch a little bit now and again, and I attribute that to the CPU being 100% pegged throughout the game. And that was the same with all three of the graphics cards that we tested. With the 1060, it did get a little bit smoother. We got 111 frames per second, and you could feel the difference of what a more modern GPU has to offer in this game. Now, I think we could have turned the settings up at this point, but we decided to keep them the same to get a more fair comparison between the cards. Then we put in our RTX 2070, and we were able to get 124 frames a second. It wasn't as much as I expected we would get, but I think we're being limited by the CPU at this point. We're being bottlenecked, and so really it's, I wouldn't spend 2070 money if you're just going to play Fortnite, but our R9 did admirably. In fact, we got a victory royale out of this, and my son was thrilled. So, up next we have Apex Legends, definitely a bigger challenge for our R9 270. In this game, the card performed fine. It wasn't fantastic, but given that we went with medium settings, we still got 55 frames a second, and it was completely playable. It did have some moments where there were some lag and stutter, but the biggest improvement really came when we upgraded to the 1060, and unlike Fortnite, we saw huge improvements with each graphics card addition. In this case, we got 98 frames per second with the 1060, and gameplay was super smooth and easy. And you can see, though, even with this card in, we have serious CPU bottlenecks, with the CPU being pinged at 98 to 100% most of the game. When we switched to the 2070, we got even smoother gameplay, but it still had glitches here and there attributed to that CPU, but we still got 136 frames per second, which isn't terrible, obviously. But, I think we're really pushing the limits of this CPU with this title, but it was certainly playable. Up last, we have CSGO, a game from the same era as this Core i5-3550. So I would expect that it to perform well. And in fact, it does. With the R9 270, we were able to get 123 frames a second. And the gameplay was super smooth. There weren't any stutters or jitters, and we didn't really have any issues. In fact, when we stepped up to the 1060, we got 160 frames a second and still didn't have any issues. It's nice to see the game scale with the new graphics card. When we added the 2070, we got 192 frames a second. You certainly don't need a 2070 to play CSGO. As a matter of fact, the R9 270 was more than enough and perfectly adequate for CSGO. Okay, so I think we had a pretty good result. Let's go over what we spent and what our end result was. We got a Dell Precision 710MT tower with a Core i5-3550 in it for about $80. Then I bought an R9 270 for about $40, which puts me at $120. That's not a lot of money to spend on a gaming PC. Now, in order for me to use some of these higher end graphics cards, I did have to swap out the power supply instead of just using the included Dell power supply with an adapter. While it is fine for the R9, I did need it for the 1060 and definitely for the 2070. And I'm using an older power supply I had sitting around, so I am going to leave that in there and I give it to my nephew. So in all, I would say, that's about a $50 value, more or less. So I'd say we're still at about $170, well below our $200 budget. That's not bad for gaming for Fortnite, for Apex, for CSGO, Minecraft, other those kind of games. Am I going to be playing AAA games? Probably not. If I were to install a new modern AAA game like, say, Modern Warfare, I would have to definitely play at low settings and turn off a lot of things. And even then, I'd still have probably pretty poor frame rate. But those are the compromises I make here. It is a micro ATX motherboard in there, and all these components can be upgraded later for relatively inexpensive, certainly as I'm looking at modern Ryzen CPUs and motherboards when they drop in price when availability becomes better. But all in all, I think it's a pretty good spend if you're looking to get into PC gaming and don't want to spend $500, $1,000 right out of the gate. And really, you just want to enjoy a few titles. So with that being said, let me know what you guys think. Would you have done something different if you had $200 to spend? Let me know what you think down below. Like this video if you liked it, and please subscribe to the channel and share with your friends. And I hope you all have a good evening.